So let's talk about something that has challenged Christians for, well, centuries. When you're faced with real danger, what's the right thing to do? Are you supposed to just be passive, or does the Bible actually give us other options? We're going to dive right into the scriptures and find out.
And this is the core of it, right? Mistake or martyrdom? Is running into a dangerous situation just a foolish error, or is trying to avoid it a lack of faith? It's a question that can really freeze you up with indecision. So let's get into what the Bible actually says about how to handle threats to your safety.
You know, for a lot of Christians, the heart of this whole dilemma comes down to one really famous and frankly often misunderstood command from Jesus during the Sermon on the Mount. It's a single verse that has pretty much shaped how people have thought about nonviolence for ages. And there it is, a direct quote from Jesus himself. Now, on the surface, it seems crystal clear. Someone hits you, you just offer them the other side. But you have to ask, does this really mean we're supposed to passively accept any and all harm no matter what? Is this a command to just be a helpless victim? Let's dig a little deeper. It turns out the Bible doesn't just hand us a single one-size-fits-all rule. It's more like it offers a practical toolkit, a set of God-given options for when we find ourselves in danger. It's really about using wisdom, not just following a rigid formula. So, let's break down these 4 key strategies the Bible gives us. We can trust the law, we can defend ourselves, we can escape or hide, and then finally, when there's no other option left, we can submit to God's sovereignty. Let's look at the biblical case for each one. First up, trusting the law. Here, the Apostle Paul in Romans is describing government authorities as, get this, ministers of God. He's saying they were established to keep order and punish people who do evil. So what that means is that seeking protection from the police or using the legal system is a totally sound, biblically endorsed first step. Now this right here is such a powerful image. Think about it. When Nehemiah was leading the charge to rebuild Jerusalem's walls, his people were under constant, very real threat from their enemies. And what was their response? They didn't just pray. They worked with a tool in one hand and a weapon in the other. This is an incredible illustration of the principle that active self-defense is not against faith. Okay, and this one might actually surprise you. Jesus himself commanded his followers to flee persecution. He didn't tell them in every single situation to just stay and face it. In fact, if you look through the Gospels, you'll see Jesus escaping and hiding from danger himself. And the Apostle Paul did too. Remember the story of him being let down a city wall in a basket to get away? Self-preservation is a valid, God-given choice. All right, so now that we have this framework, trusting the law, defending yourself, escaping, let's circle all the way back to that verse that started this whole conversation. With this new context, what did Jesus really mean when he said to turn the other cheek? This is where it all clicks into place. The argument is that this command was never meant to outlaw self-defense. No, it was a radical teaching against personal revenge, against that eye for an eye cycle of retaliation. It's all about breaking the cycle of violence, not about being a doormat. It's about not letting your personal anger and your desire to get even drive your actions, which is a very different thing from protecting yourself or your family from harm. And here is the ultimate proof. When they were literally struck, neither Jesus nor Paul just passively turned the other cheek. Not at all. Jesus challenged the injustice of it, basically asking, "Why are you hitting me?" And Paul called out the hypocrisy of being struck when it was against the law. They didn't hit back, but they absolutely did not respond with passive acceptance. They stood up and spoke out for justice. Okay, now we have to talk about the final option. And, this one's a sobering one. We've explored all the ways believers are encouraged and even commanded to preserve life. But the Bible is also very realistic. It knows that sometimes there is simply no way out. So while we're encouraged to be wise and seek safety, there are those moments in history, and even today, where believers get cornered. When the government itself is the one persecuting you, when self-defense is impossible, and when every escape route is cut off, what then? And this is where we see that principle of submitting to God's sovereignty play out. The book of Acts tells the heartbreaking story of James, the brother of John, who was executed by King Herod. And Stephen, even while being stoned to death, prayed for his attackers. This is true martyrdom. It's not a mistake made because someone failed to escape. It's a final, courageous act of faith when all the other doors have been slammed shut. So, what's the big takeaway from all this? We've seen a whole range of biblically supported responses to danger, from calling the cops to, in the very last resort, faithful submission. How are we supposed to make sense of it all?
And here's the bottom line. There isn't a simple flowchart. The Christian life requires wisdom and discernment. It's about prayerfully looking at the situation you're in and choosing from the God-given options you have available. And that choice might be a prudent decision to preserve life, or it might be to courageously face an end that you just can't avoid. And that leaves us with a final and I think the most important question. It's not just about knowing your options, it's about having the wisdom to know which one to use and when. So how do we cultivate a faith that is both wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove? A faith that's ready to act when it's time to act and ready to submit when we're called to submit? Well, that's a question for each of us to answer in our own lives.